Doherty.
And to begin with, I want to welcome Cara Darmody and her father Mark to the Visitors Gallery. Cara, as we all know, has just finished her 50-hour protest outside the Dáil, and you're an incredible young woman, and we're all so proud of you. We know that we have a fight in our hands to stop Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael from watering down or removing the right for children to have an assessment of need in a timely manner. But I think I can speak for all of the combined opposition when I say we will be with you every step of the way in this fight, and we'll keep going until every child has an assessment of need, the services and supports that they need to flourish and to thrive, and that no child will be left behind. And Cara, you're an absolute inspiration to all of us, and we are so proud of you. A tháinig tá scaneal na hospital náisiúnta an scéal seo go le ré agus a ré tá tógra da €650 million inis pléiscithe go dtí €2.2 billion agus níl sé déanta fás. Agus iniu tícimid go bhfuil moll eile an tógra seo. An cuigiú déag deirte nua crínithe le cuig bliana nuas. Tánaiste the scandal of the National Children's Hospital has now become an epic saga. A project that was supposed to conclude, that was supposed to cost the state €650 million, has now ballooned into a project that is costing €2.2 billion, and we don't know if it's finished even at that. Your Minister for Health visited the project last February. She said it's 99% complete. We were within touching distance, she said. But today we learned that we're far from within touching distance, that it's going to be pushed back again. Not for the first time, not for the second time, but for the 15th time in the last 5 years, your government has missed this target. We're told now today that at the very earliest that this hospital will open in June 2026. And the CEO of the hospital board isn't even confident of that date. You've broken your election promise when you said it would be delivered in June. And do you really expect the public to have any greater faith in this date compared to any one of the other 15 dates that you and your government ministers have announced? Taoiseach, you personally signed the contract for the National Children's Hospital without even a finalised plan in place. It was billed as you go. And that is why BAM has the state over the barrel for the last 8 years. Now your government is blaming the construction company. It's not a surprise to anybody on this side that developers are going to squeeze as much profit out as they can. But competent ministers are supposed to protect the public purse. So when you signed that contract, you declared open season on the public finances, complete incompetence. And anyone who's signed a contract, whether you're building your house or indeed just replacing a kitchen, you know that you need a plan in place. But you also then, even when it was going out of control, costs were ballooning, you had the chance to change course. BAM offered to withdraw from this contract. You had the chance to change, but you didn't take it. You had the chance to put in a proper plan in place, but you didn't take it. You signed on the dotted line, despite no obligation to do so, and a contract that is totally skewed in favour of the construction company. So I'm sure we've heard before from you, and you might say it again, that lessons will be learned. But lessons can't be learned unless people take responsibility. So can I ask you, do you take responsibility as the minister who signed off on that contract, that it was the wrong contract to sign? That is why BAM is over a barrel for 8 years. Do you accept that you got it wrong? Will you tell us now when children will be treated in that hospital, and how can we have any confidence in that date?
Deputy.
And why? Why have we missed this deadline 15 times? And maybe also inform the Dáil, how much is this hospital going to cost the public purse at the end of the day?
Thanks very much, Lascian Corda. And I want to begin today by condemning the senseless anti-Semitic murder overnight of Yaron and Sarah, 2 young diplomats in Washington, D.C., who were killed in the prime of their life. a young couple soon to be engaged. I want to think of them and their families. I want to send our sympathies to them. I also want to think of all of those present, including one of our own young diplomats who was present last night in the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. Anti-Semitism is a disgusting, despicable, vile scourge, and we should condemn it at each and every opportunity. Can I also join with Deputy Doherty in welcoming Cara back to the Dáil Gallery, and I look forward to working with her, and I want to assure her that there's no tribal division here between opposition and government. Everybody in this House wants to make progress on children's disability services, on assessments of needs, on access to therapies, and my colleague Minister Naughton, Minister Foley have the full support of government, and I hope we can all work in a cross-party way in making the progress we really need to make in relation to children's disability services. Deputy Doherty, thank you for raising the issue of the National Children's Hospital. The reality is this hospital is now almost complete from a construction point of view, well over 95% complete, and the technical commissioning is now underway. We're moving towards a twin track where Children's Health Ireland have early access to the hospital. So it's not a question of waiting for every single last bit of construction to be completed, but the commissioning work being able to start alongside it. I think that's a practical and appropriate thing to do so we can get this hospital open, and indeed so that the access can happen on a phased basis as parts are fully completed. That's good. It's urgent. Children need it, parents need it, and I'm assured that the National Paediatric Hospital Development Board, CHI and BAM, are engaged on achieving this. Let's not lose sight, though, of the facts. Within the overall budget for this hospital, a budget that hasn't changed from the €2.2 billion that you asked about earlier, 2 satellite centres are already open, in Tala Hospital and in Connolly. These are part of that overall budget, that overall envelope, the Children's Hospital project. They're complete, they're open. And indeed, the facility in Connolly has now hit a milestone of 100,000 children who have been treated there. So sometimes when you speak of this project, you swear nothing had happened. 100,000 children have already benefited in the Connolly element alone from having that hospital open. It is a world-class project of massive scale, with an internal street, the length of Grafton Street, 4 acres of open space, a massive increase in terms of the provision, in terms of theatre capacity, and many of the issues we discuss in this House in terms of how we can make more progress on children's waiting times. 22 operating theatres and procedure rooms, and providing every child and parent with a single ensuite room, so the days of parents having to sleep on hard floors at night as their children maybe spend weeks, if not months, in hospital ends. A hospital with 6,150 rooms located on 12 acres. This will be state-of-the-art. I'm pleased to say the hospital's elevated helipad is complete. It will be shared with St James's Hospital. It offers rapid, safe access to key areas, including critical care, theatres and ED. So everything that you raise in this House, and we all raise, is actually about demonstrating the necessity for this hospital. And yes, we know it's a hospital that costs more than originally intended. That is true. And yes, you know, because you've been covering finance for a hell of a long time for your party, you know that we've changed significantly the approach we take to the delivery of infrastructure. You know changes we've made only in recent weeks in terms of the role of the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. But I guarantee you, when this hospital is open, and this is a hospital that we've been told at the PAC today is due to be completed by September and start treating patients in 2026. It will transform children's life. And when we live in a country that's spending over €100 billion, around €110 billion in an annual budget each and every year, investing just over €2 billion over a number of years for a hospital that will serve children well into the next century, is a good thing to do, an appropriate thing to do, and it will make a very, very significant difference to children's health services in this country.
Thank you.
Sure, we all know that. Sure, but that's why we've been waiting years for the hospital to open. The question I put to you is, for the last 5 years, and you've been Taoiseach for some of that, but before that you were Minister for Health, the deadline for opening this hospital has been missed 15 times. 15 times. Like, that's crazy. Crazy. Because children, you're right, are waiting for this hospital. We know it's state-of-the-art. But not only has the deadline been missed 15 times, this project has gone from 650 million up to €2.2 billion. And we're not sure that that's going to be the final cost. Taoiseach, I put it to you. You personally signed off on this contract. I said accountability starts when you start accepting responsibility. Can you at least today, on the day that we're told that the project is delayed again, that it will not see patients until June 2026 at the earliest, and the CEO is saying that he is not confident in that date. On this day, can you not at least acknowledge that you got this wrong, that you shouldn't have signed this contract, that the contract you signed, which was a build-as-you-go, a contract with no plan, and it was wrong, and that is why we're in a situation in the last 5 years that the government has missed its targets 15 times, and this project has ballooned out of control.
The sheer hypocrisy of you, though, because only in March of this year, the First Minister of Northern Ireland, who's your party's Vice President, said she was delighted, quote, that £671 million sterling would be spent on a state-of-the-art children's hospital at Belfast Royal Victoria Hospital. Ladies and gentlemen, who was that contract with? Does anyone know? BAM. The same developer who's building the hospital in this jurisdiction. Now, worse than that, the contract. No, I'm not. Sorry, I have more. I have more to say, please. The contract was announced. It was welcomed, but not only was the contract signed with BAM. You know what happened then? They pulled out. They pulled out, and as a result, you further compounded the delays to delivery of the project. Not only that. The children's hospital that you're delivering in Northern Ireland, that your First Minister, your Vice President welcomed, is more expensive per square metre than the children's hospital we're delivering here in this jurisdiction. They're not my words. They are the words of the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Office here in the Oireachtas. They've looked at the hospital Sinn Féin are presiding over in the north, the hospital we're presiding over here with BAM, and they found yours is more expensive than the one we're delivering. So get over yourself with the absolute hypocrisy.
Deputy Ivana Bacik, please. Deputy Bacik, please. Order. Please.
I want to join in welcoming Cara Darmody and her father Mark to the public gallery and commend you and your family for your tireless and fierce advocacy for children who so desperately require additional services and supports. We will continue to work with you. Taoiseach, 10 years ago today, we, the people of Ireland, used our votes to make marriage equality a reality, to make Grá the law. I had intended to raise this happy anniversary with you today and to speak about the policies we still need to implement to realise the equal rights of all LGBTQ+ people in Ireland. But Taoiseach, breaking news has overtaken us, and instead I must raise with you some shocking international news which has broken since we stood in this chamber yesterday. Recalling, of course, that as we face into the weekend, there is no sign still of any international aid coming through for those children and infants in Gaza, many thousands of them, facing starvation. The dire warnings that 14,000 infants will die by the weekend without this aid. And then overnight, we saw 2 young Israeli diplomats murdered in cold blood outside the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., and I want to join in condemning outright their brutal murders. We know an Irish diplomat was present, and we're glad to hear they were unharmed. But that news was accompanied by word that the IDF had fired shots near an international delegation that included 2 Irish diplomats in Jenin. And again, this must be condemned, Taoiseach. Then we come to the shocking revelation that Donald Trump's deportation flights are refuelling here in Ireland at Shannon Airport. These are deportation flights which are illegal, taking place in violation of a US court order. In other words, an Irish airport is being used as an instrument to violate human rights. On Tuesday, a judge in Massachusetts ruled that the Trump administration's attempt to deport migrants from a number of countries to South Sudan unquestionably violated an earlier court order. Lawyers for 7 of the men being deported, we understand, were given little more than 24 hours' notice of their client's expulsion. And we understand that one of the planes in question, flight JNY 588A, is due to refuel here at Shannon Airport on its return journey from Sudan later today. I understand about 9:30 p.m. this evening, according to flight logs. Taoiseach, this is just the latest controversy about the use of Shannon Airport by the US administration. We know that planes are landing at Shannon en route to deliver bombs to Israel for use in that brutal bombardment of Gaza that has caused so much death, so much devastation, so many children whose lives have been ended. Yet Irish government ministers have shown an astounding lack of curiosity about how our airspace and airports are being used by the US at any given time. And Taoiseach, you'll be aware of the barrage of revelations about US flights refuelling at Shannon in the last 2 years. But the state's exact position on this remains something of a mystery. So I have some very specific questions. Why is Ireland allowing US flights to land here en route to deliver destruction to Gaza? On the deportation point, were you aware that flights involving illegal deportation and disappearance of people from America are also landing here? How many of these flights have refueled at Shannon? And will Ireland continue to allow deportation flights to land where they are in violation of court orders? In particular, will flight JNY 588A be allowed to land this evening at Shannon?
Well, firstly, and I very much appreciate that events have overtaken, but firstly, can I just join with you in acknowledging that it is the 10th anniversary of marriage equality today, acknowledge the very significant role your own party played in this, and enjoyed being in government with you during that period when we put this referendum to the people of Ireland and became the first country in the world where by popular democratic vote we voted overwhelmingly to recognise that love is love. And I do recognise, as you do, on this day, that there is still more work to do, and that in fact, if we've seen in recent times, progress can go backwards. And it's very important in 2025 that we continue to speak up for our values and the values of the Irish people in terms of equality and inclusion. So I just want to acknowledge that too. Thank you also for your comments in relation to our people, our diplomats in Ramallah in our Palestinian mission. And I was pleased to speak with the head of the Irish mission to Palestine yesterday, Phelan McLaughlin, who him and his deputy were present in Jenin outside the refugee camp when the Israeli Defence Forces appallingly fired what they describe as warning shots in their direction or over their heads, I think specifically. And this is the latest in a long line of intimidatory action by the Israeli Defence Forces, directed either at diplomats or also at our peacekeepers in Lebanon. And we've conveyed our views in the strongest possible terms, as have the European Union, to Israel through, in our case, through the ambassador to Ireland. In relation to the issues you've raised specifically regarding the deportation flight landing in Shannon, I'm conscious it's the dawn and I want to provide accurate information as I have it, and it is very much an evolving situation because I'm aware of media reports that suggest a US flight on the 21st of May landed in Shannon. This was a civil aircraft, and as such no diplomatic clearance would have been sought or indeed would have been required. The regulation of civil aircraft and flights is a matter for the Department of Transport. Now, I've spoken to the Minister for Transport in relation to this morning. I've also spoken to my own department too. As you'll be aware, and as the House will be aware, Laskin Corla, diplomatic clearance to overfly or land in the state is required from my own department for any military and state aircraft, but not for civil aircraft. And what is most important is that we now have full clarity on what may or may not have taken place. So officials from my own department are liaising with the Department of Transport, the Department of Justice and the US authorities. Can I say this though? I mean, I'm concerned about some of the aggressive migration policy that we see being pursued in the United States of America. What I would say though is in the first instance, it's not for us to determine the legality of the US administration's actions in relation to their courts. It is for the US administration to answer in the same way that if we had a deportation flight landing in another country, there would be a presumption that those on that flight are lawfully detained. So I am trying to piece together here information that is coming at us in the first instance through US media and the decision of the US courts. But I am very happy to keep in close contact with you and with this House, because I do recognise there's significant public interest and public concern in relation to this too.
Deputy Bacik.
Well, Taoiseach, thank you for providing a little more clarity. I do appreciate it's an evolving situation. However, I think there's a very specific question here about that particular flight that I raised with you. We do have we have seen that court order from the US, but I do appreciate also that you will keep us in opposition parties updated as the situation evolves. And certainly I think we do require much greater clarity on the broader picture of US airplanes refuelling at Shannon, where they're en route to drop bombs or to provide bombs to Israel to drop in Gaza. I think that's where we do need clarity, and it's been sadly lacking from government, and I think we do need that. I do also welcome, by the way, your positive comments this morning on the radio about our proposal, led by my colleague Deputy Duncan Smith, that we'll be bringing before the Dáil next week, calling on the government to bring a resolution to the UN General Assembly to try and move things on, to try and ensure that Israel can no longer act with impunity and that the international community can seek to address the situation and ensure that humanitarian aid reaches the desperate, starving people of Gaza. So I welcome your positive comments, which, by the way, were rather different to the Taoiseach's comments in response in this House yesterday, where he fell very far short of even agreeing to consider the proposal that we in Labour are bringing forward. And we're looking for support on a cross-party basis for this. We do believe this is an issue that is of such enormity, this genocide that's going on in Gaza, that we do have to ensure that we speak with one voice on this, and that Ireland is leading on an international stage to ensure an end to the suffering of the people of Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. This is genocidal activity. There's no two ways about it. And the Israeli government is rather upfront and blunt in relation to it outlining its military and political objectives in relation to Gaza, which are apparent, are clear breaches of international law. And as I've been saying, and I want to continue to say, the Irish people have through their taxes, sent a very significant amount of aid to get to the people of Palestine. And that aid is now effectively, not to be flippant, parked in Jordan for the last 4 months. Enough food for 6,000 Palestinian people. That is only a number of trucks out of the overall international contribution to this, all sitting there. And there's only one reason, and one reason alone, that can't get in today. And that is the decision of the Israeli government. So we do need to take more action. Now, what I did say, and I mean it sincerely, I will engage constructively with your party on your proposals you bring forward, and the earlier the better, as I know you will. And I will also meet today with Senator Francis Black in terms of our own proposals to bring forward legislation regarding the occupied Palestinian territory. And I hope to be in a position to update government and then this House on that next week.
Thank you, Deputy Charles Ward.
Taoiseach, there are multiple community playgroups in County Donegal that face closure because they've been affected with defective concrete. The cracks in the walls of these buildings have been growing at a concerning rate. Like many buildings in the county, there's only one option, and that's full demolition. Unfortunately, however, under the current redress scheme for buildings affected with defective concrete blocks, these childcare facilities do not qualify for any funding for demolition and rebuild because they are not a home. Early childhood educators and parents of these playgroups are understandably very frustrated about the decision not to consider these buildings for the defective concrete remediation funding, especially given that Donegal County Council previously advised that the criteria for funding was being rewritten to include the likes of Rafo and Letterkenny community playgroups, and that the Housing Authority would ensure the applications would fit within the framework. However, despite these assurances, funding has not been made available either to these playgroups. I know playgroups have explored alternative funding options, PABL and Department of Education, but no viable solution has been identified. Rafo Community Playgroup have already committed to providing places for 56 children from September 2025 to July 2026. But without adequate support, this facility will be forced to close. The loss of this vital community resource will have serious consequences for the families and the working parents and the wider community of Rafo. Furthermore, its closure becomes unavoidable, which should not be the case. Funding for redundancy packages for the staff will need to be addressed. How are community playgroups such as Rafo expected to navigate this situation? The current position therein is an enormous strain on the playgroup, its staff and its families who depend on it. We are already dealing with a shortage of childcare facilities in County Donegal. This issue has not been addressed. It will be even harder for the people to access childcare in the future. I'm seeking clarity on this matter, Taoiseach, and constructive discussion on the next step to ensure that these essential services remain available. The government has a responsibility in relation to childcare and needs to step in to help maintain a fantastic service which has been an integral part of the Rafo community for over 40 years. So my question to you, Taoiseach, will you ensure that funding is allocated to community playgroups in County Donegal that are affected by defective concrete so they are not forced to close?
Yeah, I want to thank Deputy Ward for raising this matter, and I had the pleasure of meeting the Rafo Community Playgroup myself during a relatively recent visit to Donegal, and they keep in touch with me directly, as I know they do with the Oireachtas members from Donegal. I see Minister McConnell here as well, and I know they also keep in contact with the Taoiseach and with the Minister for Children too, and indeed I think with the Children's Ombudsman. If I can use, and I appreciate you're referencing more than Rafo Community Playgroup, but I think it is I may use that as an example of the broader issue, if that's okay, because it's one I'm a little bit more familiar with, and you referenced it too. So there was a building inspection, I think, carried out in autumn 2023 in Rafo, which revealed that mica was present in the foundations of the building. And initially it was felt that the building would need underpinning rather than demolition. But at the end of February 2024, there had been significant further deterioration, and there was a follow-up visit in March of 2024, and the architect advised that the building would be unsafe to use past June, as you know, and should be demolished. I want to really commend the playgroup, by the way, because they've been extraordinarily proactive. I have to really acknowledge that, because I've had quite a few dealings with them. They went on and then identified a local building, I think it's called Volt House, to use temporarily for service provision, together with an existing prefab that's on their own site and thankfully unaffected by mica. And renovations took place at both locations. And I'm pleased to say that we did provide some sustainability funding from Strand 1 as well to try and help with the rental costs up to May of 2025. Rafo, I believe, is the community playgroup is currently providing service to around 22 children from this site, and I think 14 children in the prefab. Now, I know, and they tell me that the Volt House site is suboptimal as a permanent solution, and the service has to operate as a pack-away service, which you can only imagine the huge challenge that is, putting the equipment into storage at the end of every day and back out again the next day as well. You're right, in early this year, early 2025, Rafo Community Playgroup did apply for building blocks capital funding, and on the 25th of March, Pobble, who administer that, were included on an email from the Rafo Community Playgroup as well, who sought further support on further sustainability funding and a written strategy of options and a plan of support going forward, and that fear that the playgroup could need to close as well. Now, a meeting was set up on the 9th of April between that service, Donegal Childcare Committee and Pobble. At the end of the meeting, Pobble clarified that no decisions had been made in the building grants capital grant application, though clarified the eligibility. Following on from that meeting, we've had a steering group comprising of Pobble, Donegal Childcare Committee and the service to be convened, and Pobble is now looking at further sustainability support options and will bring forward proposals. I believe Donegal Childcare Committee is also exploring the potential cost of securing another building on behalf of the service as well. So I'm told that Pobble and the Donegal Childcare Committee will support the board to decide on the strategy for the next 12 months as well. I know everybody in government wants to find a way forward, and I'm conscious I've mentioned Rafo. It's not the only playgroup affected as well. So Minister Foley and all of us across government will work constructively with you to try and find a pathway forward.
Thank you, Deputy Ward.
Thank you for engaging in that matter there. The reality is that the effective concrete crisis still leaves many behind. Many community buildings across Donegal have been excluded from the scheme and classed as commercial buildings, despite the fact they're not for profit. The scheme must be extended to include these buildings. We are faced losing community centres, childcare centres, leisure centres and further adult education centres. If we do not address these issues, our community centres in Donegal are going to basically tumble to the ground around us within the next 5 years. So I would ask you to look into extending this scheme to include these important community buildings all along Donegal. Thank you.
Understood.
Look, Anna, thank you, Deputy Ward, and I take your point and your position in relation to the broader MICA scheme and can that be changed and the likes, and you know the Programme for Government makes commitments into a review. My sense of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense of it is when I meet playgroups and others affected, they kind of just want a solution, and I think they're less, understandably, less fussed on how that solution comes about, but wanting to know that there is a way for them to continue to provide the very excellent service that they do. What I want to echo and repeat here today is government is committed to working constructively with them and others to try and find that way forward through the Childcare Committee and through Pobble in the first instance, and I can assure you of my ongoing personal interest, that of Minister Foley and the government more widely.
Thank you, Thomas. Now to Deputy Peadar, Tóibín.
Thomas, I listened to you give Pearse Doherty an answer there in relation to the National Children's Hospital, and you were like an under-pressure state agent, furiously trying to sell an overpriced, extortionate, exorbitant hospital to an increasingly angry population at the moment. Nobody's arguing about the quality of the hospital. We're arguing about the price and the length of time it's taken to deliver. Leo Varadkar promised that it would be delivered by 2020 for €700 million, save an asteroid hitting the planet. And yet it's ballooned to €2.2 billion. And today, 5 years after that initial opening date, there is still no confirmation about when it's going to open. 15 times the opening date has been postponed. And I don't believe, many people don't believe it will be open by 2027 at this rate. The National Children's Hospital is a monument to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael waste and blame shifting. Your fingers are all over this 1.5 billion extra spend. Now, this money did not appear from nowhere. That 1.5 billion euros has come from the pockets of hard-working Irish citizens and taxpayers. And it's not a victimless crime as well. The opportunity cost of that 1.5 billion euros would have actually paid for over 4,500 homes in this country. It would have housed up to 18,000 people, more than the number of people who are currently homeless currently. But, Tánaiste, you are the blame-shifting expert in this country. Simon, it wasn't me, Harris, is what we have in front of us at the moment. Now, you had a debate with myself on national television during the election in relation to this, and you stated very clearly that you did not sign this contract. You said on that statement to millions of people across the country that you were not responsible for the signature on that contract. Now, Taoiseach, will you say, were you lying to the people of Ireland on that day? Were you lying to the people watching that programme in relation to whether or not you are responsible for this particular contract? Now, this contract lacks an enormous amount of detail within it, which has allowed it to become a blank cheque for the contractor. It is designed to fail from the start. It has been acknowledged that the design was not actually complete when it issued instructions to BAM to begin Phase B of the construction works in January 2019. Now, that is an incredible situation on a project that is so large and so expensive. Now, you actually said that the buck stops with you, but what does actually that sentence mean? If you were the senior executive of a company where a project ran 5 years over and cost 1.5 billion more than it should have, you simply would not be working there anymore, Taoiseach. And yet, you're the Taoiseach of this state. Now, I believe you're in your job because you're insulated, obviously, by Fianna Fáil and independent TDs. But the problem is, you cannot enforce a culture of accountability to any other element of civil service at the moment, because for you, accountability and yourself are like oil and water.
You know why I'm in my job, Deputy Tubman? Because we had an election, and I got elected, and 458,000 people gave their first preference vote to my party. And an overwhelming majority of people gave the votes to the parties and the independents that make up this government. It's called a democracy. You ran, you got 2 seats. Congratulations. So you don't lecture me. You don't hire me. Thanks very much. I answer to the people of Wicklow. They elected me, one of the highest votes in the country. So don't give me any of that sanctimonious nonsense. We all have a mandate in this House. We had a general election. You rehearsed your lines that you must practice in front of the mirror every morning, and people went out and they gave their verdict. And we're in the government, and we're getting on with the business. And yes, of course the buck stops with me. And you know what else? You know what else the book? Well, I was going to tell you what it means. If you don't, just calm down. You ask your question, and I get an opportunity to answer. It's how this place works. So you asked a question about the Children's Hospital. I am responsible. Of course I'm responsible. I'm responsible for bringing the proposal to Cabinet, responsible for recommending that we proceed. And the easiest thing to do in politics, if you don't ever want to get into any challenging situation, is never make a decision. And you know what else I'm going to be responsible for, along with my colleagues in Fine Gael and in Fianna Fáil and the independents and those who've served in government in the intervening period? I'm going to be responsible for a world-class facility. I'm going to be responsible for transforming children's healthcare. We're going to be responsible for making sure that parents who slept on cold, hard floors in Crumlin last night can have bed facilities. I'm going to be responsible for children having single ensuite rooms. We're going to be responsible for providing a health service that's going to have more theatres than ever before, that's going to have open spaces for our children, that's going to improve medical outcomes, that's going to tackle waiting lists as well. Nobody gets everything right in politics, and a lot of lessons have been learned, and that's not what does that mean. Before you ask me what does that mean, I'll tell you what that means. We did the PwC report. PwC report looked at all of the options, and the PwC report recommended continuing and proceeding was the best option. We've brought in a number of changes in how we deal with capital projects since then. We've also set up an infrastructure division in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. Very easy to sit over there and just have to stand up and correct everyone else's homework. Much harder to come to work, roll up your sleeves and actually deliver for the people of this country.
Well, correcting homework here is an understatement. I think, that's given the fact that we could literally spend a full day with a litany of overspend, a litany of waste in this country across the whole range of the delivery of public services. Inertia, waste, and blame shifting are the characteristics of this government, and there are serious issues. Why? Not only because it is incinerating taxpayers' money, but because these are really important public services, really important infrastructures that are simply not materialising for the people that need them. Now, PAC heard this morning that BAM is only 60% through the progress that it promised to be even at this late stage. It heard that all the levers were being pushed to make the contractor deliver on this project. But what levers are there? What mechanisms are within the contract that you signed off to force the contractor to deliver these projects within the timescale and within the price? There are none. And the fact that there are none is because you, as a very well-paid Minister for Health, did not ensure that they were there. You were directly responsible for the cost and directly responsible for the fact that that infrastructure is not operating for the children who need it today.
Pretty well paid yourself, I just point that out firstly. €110 billion a year is roughly what this country is spending on its annual budget. And we've made a decision to invest €2.2 billion over several years in a project that will transform children's health and deliver a world-class children's hospital that won't just serve people for the lifetime at this stall, the next stall, the one after that. Long after we're all dead and buried and gone from this earth, there will still be children being served in that hospital as well. This is a major transformational investment decision. Yes, we all know it costs more than expected. We all know that. That's absolutely crystal clear. We've been through that, not just in this election, but in the one before that as well. But now it's about getting on with the job of actually transforming children's healthcare as well. And words like incinerating money and the likes, it's inflammatory language that misses the point. Not only is this pardon the pun, not only is this children's hospital not the most expensive hospital in the world, as you've said in the past, it's not even the most expensive children's hospital being built on the island of Ireland per square metre, according to the budgetary office of this Parliament as well. So shout me down if you want. Shout me down if you want. We are going to transform children's healthcare. You keep correcting the homework, we'll get on with doing the business.
Thank you, Taoiseach. We now move to a question from Standing or Understanding Order 38A. Deputy Gillian Toole, please. Order, please. Deputy O'Toole. Have respect for the deputy who is speaking.
Agus Gurv Mahagot a Honishta led the hull, Tiachta led the hull. Gurv Mahagot. The Irish people have endured an incredible amount in the last 5 years. Every virtue has been tested in extremely positive and sadly in some negative ways. Lives have been changed irrevocably. To advance, we must reflect, we must review,